The Undocumented Railway Series, Book 3, Lady the First Engine. Dear friends, many years ago, there were no engines on Sodor, just a small railroad only ran by horses. This all changed when a pair of overzealous men hatched a plan to open a big railway on Sodor, connecting the island's capital of Sudrain to the mainland beyond. This was not the Fat Controller's Railway, but the Sodor and Mainland Railway. These stories will tell you what happened and why it ultimately failed. The director. Story 1. The Lady of Sodor. There was great commotion down at Balladwale Wharf. The biggest ship the dockyard had ever seen had just arrived, and everyone from the local towns and villages had come to watch the spectacle. Sitting atop its hull sat what many considered a modern marvel. It was a steam engine. By today's standards, she wasn't a very big or very important looking steam engine, but to the people of Sodor in 1857, she was grand. The dockmen were worried. They'd never unloaded something so big and heavy before. Ropes were soon fastened to the engine, and every man who worked at the wharf prepared to lift her off the ship and bring her down onto a makeshift flatbed. A short chubby man wearing a smart suit and the tallest top hat the engine had ever seen stepped forward. "Right," he barked. 1, 2, 3, heave! And with a great effort, the men pulled and pulled and pulled, slowly bringing the engine up into the air. They held tightly until their arms ached and began to slowly lower her down onto the flatbed. The engine wasn't having fun. She didn't like being dangled in the air at all. At last, with a great effort, the engine was finally brought down onto the flatbed. Everyone cheered, but the celebration was quickly cut short. "Alright everyone, attention please." This time by a taller, thin gentleman. He wore a smart suit much like his short counterpart. However, instead of a tall top hat, he was wearing a short bowler. They stood atop the flatbed next to their engine and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," boomed the shorter man. 7 years ago today, myself and Mr. Stone set out to open Sodor's first steam railway. We had great support from all of you, and have even managed to build a small stretch of line from Crovan's Gate to Ballyhoo. But now we've reached our greatest achievement. This engine," carried on Mr. Stone, "is to be the first of many for our line. Mr. Boomer and I ensured to get the best, smartest and most up-to-date engine in all of railways thus far. So please, give it up for our number 1, the Lady of Sodor." The crowd cheered and applauded, and the two men smiled proudly. Lady herself smiled too, but it was less prideful and more just to be polite. In truth, she felt rather put off by the big crowd. Soon a group of 4 horses entered the wharf. A man who rode atop one of the horses jumped down and admired the beautiful steam engine. My, he said in amazement. "What do you think, Mr. Mac?" Mr. Boomer grinned, looking up at the tall fellow. "Isn't she a beauty?" "She is indeed," Mr. Mac agreed. "I'm almost tempted to get one myself. The man sure could use it." The horses grunted indignantly. Soon they were all coupled onto the flatbed and began to heave the heavy engine up the lane. Passerbyers stopped to see the iron machine roll on by. Even the cows who were grazing in their field stopped and stared at the engine. Lady was beginning to feel a little anxious. Soon the fields disappeared, with buildings of stone taking their place. At last they reached their destination. It was a small railway yard. There were only 3 sidings, a station, and a shed nearby. Lady smiled when she saw this. At last, something familiar. The flatbed was aligned in front of the rails, and some sort of ramp-like thing was brought over, so Lady could roll down onto her new railway. However, in order for this to happen, she needed to be steamed. "I can do it," called Mr. Boomer excitedly, and he hurried over to the cab and began to build Lady's fire. It was like a child on Christmas Day, impatiently wanting to play with his brand new toy. Yet no matter what Mr. Boomer did, Lady's fire would not light. Lady felt more worried than ever. How could she even start working on her new line if her controller couldn't even light her fire? Mr. Stone noticed how anxious his engine looked, and talked calmly to her. "Don't worry," he smiled. "I understand that this might seem like a lot of pressure, and that you may be a bit put off, but I know you can manage." Lady smiled. She felt a bit better. "Now then," Mr. Stone called, patting his legs, "let me have a try." He hopped into Lady's cab, added more coal, and lastly, threw a match into Lady's firebox. At once, Lady's fire roared into life and burnt brightly. Mr. Boomer stared in amazement. "I could have done that." So Lady was slowly brought down onto her rails. She was very happy to be on firm track again. Mr. Stone and Mr. Boomer hopped into the cab with Lady's driver, and the three took her out for a spin. Lady looked all around her, taking in every sight of her new home. It ran through fields and valleys, and even crossed over a small stone bridge. The line finally stopped at a little station called Ballyhoo. "This is only one of what will become many stations, Lady," smiled Mr. Stone. "Over there," declared Mr. Boomer, pointing east, "is going to be Vickerstown, then the bridge leading to the mainland." "And back the other way," added Mr. Stone, "going past Crovan's Gate, is to be the line towards Sudbury, the island's capital." "And there will be 3 branch lines," piped up Mr. Boomer. "One's at Great Waterton, one's at Kirkgronham, and most importantly, one's at Bill Godred." "You're going to be very busy," smiled Mr. Stone. "Do you think you'll be able to handle it?" Lady thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "Yes," she said with feeling. "I can."